The Modern Middle-Age Passage. The summer of 1947 carried a different feeling across Canton. The same dusty roads, cotton fields, and church bells still filled the town, but something deeper had begun to change inside the hearts of black families throughout the South. People were leaving, not just for a visit, not just for work. They were leaving behind generations of struggle, hardship, and uncertainty in search of something greater waiting somewhere beyond Mississippi. And for Wesley Howell and Rose Harmon, that somewhere was beginning to look a lot like Chicago. A few weeks after their long conversation about gambling and the future, Wesley finally sat on the front porch beside Rose and admitted something she had been waiting to hear. "You were right," Wesley said quietly. "Moving up north could really be our chance." Rose slowly smiled. "It took you long enough," she teased gently. "I was starting to worry about you." Wesley laughed softly and wrapped his arm around her shoulders. Before he could answer, Ruth appeared walking up the porch steps, carrying a small paper bag and wearing her usual knowing expression. "That's right, Wesley," Ruth announced before even sitting down. "Mississippi ain't offering us nothing but hard backs and empty pockets." Rose laughed immediately. "And moving north with my family," Ruth continued dramatically, "might help you and Rose get started on the right foot. Not your two left feet." John Lee Larry, who had been leaning against the porch rail, quickly jumped to Wesley's defense. "Now hold on," John said. "You ain't gonna let Ruth talk to you like that, Wesley?" Ruth crossed her arms instantly. "Oh, here we go." John pointed toward her proudly. "You just want to follow Rose around all day." Wesley grinned and shook his head. "It's all right, John," he said calmly. "If my sweetheart wants to move north, then let's get packed up and leave this old dusty town behind." Rose's face lit up with excitement, but then her expression shifted. "Wait a minute," she reminded him. "What about our wedding?" Wesley smiled confidently. "Baby, I was thinking—" He paused dramatically. "When we get up north, we can have ourselves a real big city wedding." Ruth immediately pointed at him. "Don't let him fast talk you, Rose." John stepped forward again. "Would you hush? Let those lovebirds work out their matrimonies." Ruth stared at him. "Matrimonies?" John nodded proudly like he had said something intelligent. "Boy, you better watch your mouth," Ruth warned. The porch erupted into laughter. As John and Ruth wandered off arguing playfully down the road, Wesley and Rose finally had a quiet moment alone. The warm evening air drifted gently through the trees while crickets sang somewhere in the distance. Rose's smile slowly faded into seriousness. "Wesley," she said softly, "I'm nervous." He looked at her carefully. "We barely know anything about Chicago," Rose admitted. "We don't know where we gonna live, and you don't even have a job waiting." Wesley took her hands gently into his own. "Listen to me," he said. "My brothers J.B. and Wilson already got jobs lined up. Our family's moving together. We ain't gonna be alone." Rose still looked uncertain, but deep in her heart, she believed God had carried them this far for a reason. Wesley smiled warmly. "Everything gonna work out," he whispered. "Now come here and give me a kiss." Rose laughed softly through her worries and leaned into his arms. Above them, the Mississippi night sky sparkled with stars. One chapter of their lives was ending. Another was just beginning. Over the next several days, the town buzzed with preparations for departure. Families packed dishes into wooden crates. Mattresses were tied to truck roofs. Suitcases filled with clothes, photographs, Bibles, and dreams sat stacked near front doors, waiting for sunrise. The Great Migration had reached Canton. Some families were heading toward New York City, others toward St. Louis. But Wesley, Rose, their families, and closest friends were bound for Chicago. The morning they prepared to leave, excitement filled the air like electricity. Wesley climbed onto the back of a truck and raised his voice proudly. "Goodbye, Mississippi!" he shouted. Rose laughed and raised her hands. "Hello, Chicago!" Ruth climbed aboard, carrying bags, and smiled wide. "You better believe I'm ready," she declared. "It's been a long time coming." John Lee Larry adjusted his hat proudly beside Wesley. "Don't forget about me," he announced loudly. "Me and Wesley gonna show Chicago how Southern folks get down." Ruth rolled her eyes immediately. "There you go again. Can't you act like you got at least half a peanut brain?" John grinned. "Don't worry about me. Me and Wesley got it all figured out." Wesley suddenly motioned for everyone to gather around. Families circled together quietly. Children stopped playing. Even Ruth stopped talking for a moment. Wesley looked around carefully at all the familiar faces preparing to leave the only home they had ever known. "My beautiful people," he began, "we got to stick together up there." Everyone listened closely. "My brothers told me Chicago ain't always easy, so no matter what happens, we watch each other's backs." The crowd nodded quietly. "And everything else?" Wesley said confidently. "Gonna be all right." Ruth folded her arms skeptically. "You trust in advice from J.B. and Wilson?" Wesley laughed. "Army taught me something," he replied proudly. "Always have two plans, your main plan and your backup plan." Rose smiled proudly at him. "That's why I love you." Then suddenly she leaned closer. "Now explain that sandwich letter from the Army." Wesley burst out laughing. "Oh, Lord! No, seriously," Rose insisted. Wesley grinned mischievously. "See, a sandwich got 2 slices of bread." "Uh-huh. You the bottom slice. I'm the top slice." Rose narrowed her eyes suspiciously. "And what's the middle part?" Wesley smiled slowly. "Our love." Before Rose could answer, Ruth interrupted loudly from nearby. "Excuse me, y'all know we standing right here?" John pointed dramatically at Ruth. "Let that man express himself to his bride-to-be." "You wish!" Ruth snapped. The entire group burst into laughter again. Then Rose clapped her hands together. "All right, everybody, let's stay focused. We moving to Chicago." "That's right," Wesley shouted proudly. "Watch out, Chicago. Mississippi folks coming north." And so the journey began. Truck engines roared to life. Buses rolled slowly onto dusty highways. Families waved goodbye to churches, cotton fields, front porches, and memories stretching back generations. As miles passed beneath them, hope slowly replaced fear. For Wesley and Rose, the road north represented far more than geography. It represented transformation, opportunity, freedom, a future their parents had only dreamed about. Somewhere along the long journey north before reaching Chicago, Wesley and Rose stopped in Canton. There, in a small courthouse surrounded by only close family and friends, they quietly became husband and wife. Afterward, Wesley smiled at Rose and kissed her gently. "Don't worry," he whispered. "I still owe you that big Chicago wedding." Rose smiled and squeezed his hand tightly. Together they continued toward Chicago, toward factories, crowded neighborhoods, church communities, new struggles, new victories, and generations yet unborn whose lives would forever be shaped by the courage of those who dared to leave the South searching for something better. This was more than a move, more than a migration. This was the modern Middle Age passage, a journey that would forever reshape Black American families and create a new path forward for generations to come.